Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 80 of Journey into Legends. Today we will be continuing the New Jedi Order with Book 3, Dark Tide Ruin by Michael Stackpole. Ruin was released in 2000, and it is the second and final book in the Dark Tide duology. I've really enjoyed New Jedi Order so far, and I really liked Book 1 of this duology, so I'm excited to continue. Without further ado, let's read and review. As the Yuuzhan Vong continue to conquer planets and advance further into the galaxy, Leia and Danny Kui travel to Bastion to recruit the help of the Imperial Remnant, led by Gilad Pellaeon. It's so interesting and fun to see the Empire and the New Republic as allies, especially with Pellaeon leading the Empire. It's also really a fun surprise to see Chiss forces working with the Empire led by Jagged Fel. I'm really excited to see more of the Remnant and hopefully other pivotal factions involved in the war effort, perhaps the Hutts or other crime syndicates as well. After the mission to Bimiel in the previous book, Corran and Ganner, along with Jason now, travel to the planet of Garqi to find out more about the Yuuzhan Vong. Here they collaborate with the Resistance Force, and they discover that pollen from the Ithorian Bafur trees causes an allergic reaction in the Yuuzhan Vong armor, which kills the wearer. The Jedi decide to burn the Bafur trees to keep the Vong from knowing this. However, Shadow Shai is later able to deduce the importance of the trees, and opts to use dead armor at the Battle of Ithor. Honestly, I don't really know what the narrative purpose of Shadow Shai discovering the allergy was and preventing its effects on Ithor. To me, that made the whole mission to Garqi less impactful and relevant. I think if the allergen had been implemented on Ithor and caused a major shift in the battle, the whole Garqi plotline would have been legitimized, and the burning of the Bafur trees on Garqi would have been a much more rewarding scene. However, the Garqi plotline was still entertaining, especially its impact on Ganner, who, after sustaining a huge scar on his face in battle, reevaluates his association with Kip's faction, as well as his own perspective on the war and the Jedi. And finally, one of the coolest parts of the entire book was the sudden appearance of the Imperial Remnant at Garqi, who arrived just barely on time to rescue the task force and prevent the destruction of the fleet. There's a really great scene with Pellaeon ruminating on how many times he's dreamed of stumbling on a battered New Republic fleet, and how times have changed and he's become their savior, which I found a really interesting turn of events. One of the most surprising plotlines in this book was Elagos Akla's daring diplomatic mission to meet with Shadow Shai and reach an understanding and hopefully a truce. These were really interesting chapters that helped flesh out the Vong and their beliefs, as well as their motivations and how they view the New Republic and the Jedi. And this plotline ends with an absolute gut punch. After leading you to believe that Elagos would be safely returned to the New Republic, bringing with him a message for Corran Horn, Shadow Shai delivers Elagos' skeleton to Corran, which was such a shocking and tragic twist for Elagos' character. With how lovable and innocent Elagos was, this made Shadow Shai such a deplorable villain, and made his later death so satisfying. Probably the weakest plotline of this book followed Luke, Mara, and Anakin as they follow the trail of a rogue Twi'lek Jedi named Daishara Kor, who seeks revenge against the Yuuzhan Vong and is looking for any surviving superweapons. This plotline had some fun surprises, such as a visit to Vortex and an appearance from Kui Zux, both from the Jedi Academy trilogy. There were also a few mentions of the Eye of Palpatine, and although I really hated Children of the Jedi, it's cool to see one of the more obscure and divisive Bantam books get some mentions. But overall, although the plotline was still entertaining, it definitely added the least to the overall story, with it only really serving as setup for Daishara Kor's eventual death at the Battle of Ithor. After the previous book concluded with the Battle of Dantooine, this book does the same, but with what I think was an even better battle, the Battle of Ithor. What was really interesting about this battle was that it ended up being decided by the duel between Shadow Shai and Corran Horn, which, by the way, was a fantastic duel that paid off all the build-up of 2 books, including the death of Elagos and the entire Bimiel storyline from Onslaught. But even after Shadow is killed, which would have saved Ithor based on the terms of the duel, Dane Lian, Shadow's aide, still destroys Ithor with a biological weapon at the behest of a new villain named Savong Law. I honestly wish Dane Lian wasn't immediately killed after this so that he could have a much more painful death later on, because this was just despicable. And what's most aggravating about the fall of Ithor is how the blame is somehow shifted to Corran Horn by, you guessed it, Borsk Phalia, the son of a bitch. Because of this, Corran decides to leave the Jedi to avoid the Jedi being vilified for Ithor. Once again, Borsk Phalia somehow finds a way to be the most deplorable character in the book, which says a lot since this book had some really hateable villains. Anyways, this was a really nice, albeit irritating way to end the book, and I'm interested to see how all this plays out for Corran, as well as the Jedi Order as a whole. So overall, this book was easily my favorite of the series so far, and delivered on all cylinders for me. Other than the Daishara Kor plotline, this book was really tightly written, and the story here was just fantastic. This book had fantastic villains, action, storylines, and it had one of the most devastating character deaths in the EU so far. And overall, I just really enjoyed this book and the duology as a whole. And we're back with some more Star Wars tales, this time with issue 5, which has 5 stories, beginning with Yaddle's Tale, The One Below, which tells the story of the 2 centuries Yaddle spent in imprisonment under the surface of the planet Koba, her return to the Jedi, and her joining the Jedi Council. Overall, this was a really fun story. I really liked Yaddle as a character, and we don't nearly get enough stories about her, so I was glad to get another one. Next, we have What They Called Me, which is another comedic story. This one's about a wealthy man who travels to Endor and works to basically assimilate the Ewoks by, for example, shaving and dressing them. This one was pretty dumb, another comedic one that I just didn't find very funny. Next is A Summer's Dream, which follows a boy on Naboo named Ian who falls in love with Padme. But because she is a political rival to his family, his father forbids the relationship. When Padme is elected queen, she pledges herself to the people of Naboo, and Ian decides to leave the planet for good. Overall, this was a pretty good story. It's interesting to see Naboo and Padme before the events of The Phantom Menace, especially getting to see the transition of power from King Varuna to Queen Amidala. It's also really interesting to see one of Padme's relationships before Anakin. Anyways, next we have a story simply called Hoth, which is 2 pages long. A Wampa tackles a probe droid and hangs him upside down in his cave. And that is literally it. And our final story is Lando's Commandos on Eagle's Wings, which follows Lando and a group of commandos as they hunt down a wing of TIE interceptor pilots turned pirates. Overall, this one wasn't very exciting. I didn't find any of the characters memorable, and I wasn't a fan of the art at all. So overall, this was a pretty mixed issue. I enjoyed the Yaddle and Padme stories, but the rest just weren't for me. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for my next video where we'll be starting the Agents of Chaos duology with Book 1, Hero's Trial. See ya.